July 1629. The coral islands they were stranded on had been transformed into something resembling hell. More than 100 innocent men, women and children had been murdered. Friends betrayed friends. Families disappeared overnight. Children were drowned simply because they were considered a burden, all under the direction of one man, Geronimus Cornelius. But while Cornelius believed he controlled the islands, another group of survivors had quietly refused to die. Their leader was a soldier named Weeby Hayes, and he was about to change history. This is Dark Australia. When Commander Francisco Pelsa left Batavia to seek help, he unknowingly left the strongest people on the islands in the safest place. Weeby Hayes and approximately 40 soldiers had been sent to West Wallaby Island to search for fresh water. Cornelius assumed they would eventually die from thirst. Instead, they discovered one of the only reliable freshwater sources anywhere on the islands. Not only that, the island was full of wallabies, seabirds and nesting eggs. Unlike Cornelius's camp, Hayes' group never began starving. They built shelters, collected fresh water, hunted, created weapons from driftwood and salvaged metal. Without knowing it, they had become the only organised resistance left alive. The islands they were stranded on offered almost nothing. There were no trees large enough for proper buildings, no crops, no permanent settlements. Food came from whatever could be caught. Wallabies became one of the survivors' most valuable food sources. They hunted them using clubs, makeshift spears and traps. Seabirds and their eggs became another staple. Fish were caught in tidal pools. Shellfish were gathered from the rocks. Seal colonies on nearby islands also provided meat, although reaching them required dangerous journeys between razor-sharp coral reefs. Every meal required work. Every day meant survival. By this stage, the survivors had already been stranded for well over a month. The reef itself had become both prison and provider. Eventually, Cornelius realised something was wrong. The soldiers hadn't died. In fact, they seemed to be thriving. That was a problem. His plan depended on eliminating anyone capable of resisting him before the rescue ship arrived. He began sending small parties to West Wallaby Island. Officially, they carried peaceful messages. In reality, their orders were murder. But every attack failed. Hayes and his men fought them off again and again. Unlike Cornelius's followers, these soldiers had military training. They built defensive stone walls, established lookouts, used the island's narrow approaches to force attackers into predictable positions. The mutineers quickly realised they were facing disciplined resistance rather than frightened survivors. Finally, Cornelius decided to lead an attack himself. It was a disastrous decision. Hayes allowed the attackers to come ashore before overwhelming them. During the fighting, Cornelius himself was captured alive. Instead of killing him, Hayes did something remarkable. He imprisoned him. Think about that. After everything Cornelius had done, the man responsible for more than 100 murders, Hayes chose justice over revenge. That decision would become one of the most important moments in the entire story, because now they had proof. A living confession. The architect of the massacre sat tied up while his followers scattered across the islands. Then, after weeks of waiting, someone spotted sails. Pelsard had returned. The rescue ship, Sardam, approached the islands carrying fresh soldiers and supplies. But as it neared the reef, small boats raced towards it. One contained Hayes, the other carried surviving mutineers desperate to reach the commander first. Hayes won. He climbed aboard and immediately explained everything: the murders, the mutiny, the capture of Cornelis. The commander reportedly struggled to believe what he was hearing. He had left behind survivors of a shipwreck. He had returned to discover one of the bloodiest massacres in maritime history. The investigations began almost immediately. Cornelis admitted large parts of what happened. Many of his followers confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Punishment was swift. Several mutineers were executed on the islands themselves. Jeronimus Cornelis suffered one of the harshest sentences available under Dutch law. His hands were cut off. He was then hanged. Others met similar fates. Some were taken back to Batavia for further trial and execution. But 2 men received a different punishment. Instead of execution, they were abandoned on the Australian mainland. Not imprisoned, not rescued, simply left behind somewhere along the coast of what is now Western Australia. Their ultimate fate remains unknown. Some historians believe they became the first permanent Europeans to live on Australian soil. Whether they survived or disappeared into history, nobody knows. The exact number has been debated for centuries. Of the approximately 340 people aboard the Batavia, around 125 lost their lives during the original wreck. Then came the murders. More than 100 additional survivors were deliberately killed under Cornelis's orders. By the time rescue finally arrived, only around 100 survivors remained. It remains one of history's worst examples of mass murder committed by shipwreck survivors. Not because of nature, not because of starvation, but because of human cruelty. Today, Weeby Hayes is remembered as one of Australia's earliest European heroes. Long before permanent British settlement, Hayes demonstrated extraordinary leadership on Australian shores. He protected civilians, organised resistance, defeated armed attackers despite overwhelming odds. He captured one of Australia's most notorious mutineers alive. Without Hayes, there may have been nobody left alive for Pelsar to rescue. The Batavia wasn't simply a shipwreck, it was a study of what happens when civilization disappears. Within weeks, ordinary people became executioners, others became heroes. The island stripped away laws, governments, and consequences. What remained was human nature. Some chose compassion, others chose unimaginable violence. Centuries later, the Batavia still raises uncomfortable questions. Was Cornelis already evil before the wreck? Or did isolation simply remove every barrier that normally keeps darkness hidden? We'll never know, but we do know this. The events on those tiny islands became one of Australia's earliest recorded horror stories. Long before convict settlements, long before bushrangers, long before Federation, the coast of Western Australia witnessed one of the darkest chapters in maritime history. Today, divers can still visit the Batavia wreck site. Artifacts recovered from the seabed, including cannons, coins, and personal belongings, are preserved in museums across Western Australia. The reefs that once echoed with fear are now peaceful, but beneath those waters, the story remains. Next time, we leave the 17th century behind and dive into another extraordinary Australian mystery. Until then, keep the lights on, because Australia feels very different after dark.